Well, hello Quilty friends. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm so happy that you're here. Today I'm going to be sewing my Bloom and Grow block, and I hope that you're ready to sew this block with me. It's a 10-inch block, and it's block number 1 in the Riley Blake Block Challenge, which kicks off on Tuesday, January 14th, and I will leave all of the links. You can get all of the information on Riley Blake's website and their blog, and so of course in the description of this video I will leave all the links. But today I'm going to show you how to make my block, and there are 17 10-inch blocks in the quilt, and we do 3 blocks every month, every Tuesday, and I think the 4th Tuesday there's like a break of a new block release so that you can catch up. And so we have 17 different Riley Blake fabric designers designing a block, and then each one of us will be doing a tutorial on our blocks, and also there's tutorials on the Riley Blake YouTube channel as well, I believe. And so because my block is the first one, I'm going to be filming this and kicking off the sew along. So again, this is a 10-inch finished block, and it's called Bloom and Grow. I'm sewing this out of my new fabric collection called Peace and Plenty. Here, I probably should have not put that there so I could show you these, but let me just kind of show you. That's some of the prints there. And here's a few other of the prints. Hope you can sort of see that. I'll show you a few things as we get going, because well, I'll just show you a quick glimpse of this too, because if you've followed me for a while, you know that I like to do during the sew along, during the Riley Blake Block Challenge, that I like to give you a recipe for the larger block as well. So this is a 20-inch block, and this is also out of Peace and Plenty, and I did it in different colors. I'm going to be talking about what I'm going to be doing with this block, but we'll talk about that at the end. I just want to get started and show you how to piece this block. It's very simple. I put my machine on a little bit of an angle, so hopefully you can see all that. If you need to see exactly, what I'm sewing, you can always zoom in on whatever device that you're watching on, except for obviously a big screen TV, but then maybe you won't need to zoom in if you're watching on a big screen, right? But if you're watching on a phone or an iPad or your computer, you can zoom in, pinch the screen. You can always put it on slow motion as well. You can rewind, you can do any of those things that you need to do. Hang on. I just oiled my machine, and there's a little drop right there. Okay. All right. So with all of that being said, I've got my pieces cut right here on this design board. They're all labeled, okay? And I use my So Handy stickers to label those. Let me show you something real quick. I've only got a shop copy, so of course this won't have shop copy when you go to sew this block, but this is what you can download every week. Riley Blake will release these blocks for you. And so this will look just like this. You can copy that off and you'll get a picture of the block and all the cutting. Within my video description, I'll do cutting as well. Cutting recipe for this Bloom and Grow block, so that you can have that too. And I'll give the recipe for the 20-inch block as well within that. So, so that you don't have to search for that. It'll just be right here on my blog. And, excuse me, not my blog, my YouTube channel. This is where I'm at. Okay, so I think I've got everything ready and set to go. And so the first thing that we're going to sew is D right here. And I'm just going to put that little sticker. I kind of just gathered those there. You can iron over them. You can leave them on there if you want. But what we're going to be doing is this section right here. okay? This is a 2" by a 2.5" inch. And so what I'm going to be doing is I have 4 of these, and so I'm going to be splitting them in 2. It might be easier to just, here, let me bring my design board over here. I cut a few extra pieces in case I needed them, so that I, you know, sometimes mistakes are made, you never know. And so hopefully you can see this a little bit better. Maybe let's put it up this way so it's not upside down for you. So I've got 4 of these 2 by 2.5 D, and I'm gonna, you know, split them apart 2 by 2. And what I mean by that is these are the little background pieces, B, that are gonna go on them, and I'm just gonna do easy corner triangles. So on these 2 of them will be sewn exactly the same way, and the other 2, so I'm going to be sewing them from, let's see if I can move this just a little bit. Hope that helps. So I'm going to be sewing that from corner to corner right here. And so 2 of them will be exactly the same way. This one, I will still lay the square there, lining up all of the corners, but I'm going to be sewing from corner to corner this way, okay? And so I just like to set those up, and I usually, you know, do that over here and then bring it to my machine, but I just kind of wanted you to be able to see. I'm not sure exactly what you can see and what you can't, but I'm doing my best. And so what I do is I use the center line on my Seam So Easy guide, because this center line right here lines right up with the needle. So you can mark from here to here if you'd like to sew. Let's see, I'll be sewing this way. You can mark from here to here with a pencil and a, you know, little marking ruler. I've got a short one here that I use sometimes when I mark. You can just, and then trace on the line, or you can just use the center line by simply just starting to sew right here. Well, I put my little, I have to have my little stitchy readers on to sew. And I just like to make sure that everything is lined up. And then I just follow this corner right here on this center line, and I don't have to mark, because that is exactly from point to point, okay? I'm just using a little scrap of fabric in between my stitches here. And so I'm going to do 2 of them exactly the same. That's this one right here. I'd like to have a finished block on the design board, or at least laid out, or a picture or something, so that I know exactly which direction that I need to be sewing from corner to corner. Okay, and now these 2 are going to be from here to here. So I did not pre-sew any of these segments, because I just thought, well, I'm going to turn on the camera, and I put it high up on a stand there, so hopefully that you could see what you needed to see. And I'm just going to sew the whole block from beginning to end, and just how I do in my sewing room. So it's fun to have you here in my sewing loft with me. Okay, so then I'm just going to put a little scrap of fabric so that I can save time and thread, and it's just faster and easier to clip. But of course, I like to do bonus sewing normally in between when I'm not filming. And so, you know, I would be sewing other little blocks in between, like 2 squares together, or, you know, something like that. Okay, so at this point I like to set my stitches right here. And then I like to trim off all at the same time. And I just trim past, see, so that's the segment. And it's just an approximate 1/4 inch seam allowance. You don't have to measure it. You can use a little mat and a rotary cutter if you want, but I just grab my scissors. I don't know, I've just always done it that way. But a lot of people like to use their little mats and rotary cutters too. Sometimes I do, but I usually use my little mat for trimming up, you know, blocks and things like that when I'm doing, using my trim it rulers. Okay, and so then I've trimmed off that excess. And I like to press my seams open. And so what I do is I'm just going to open this right here. And I do a real quick press there with my seam roller. okay? And I've got my clampers handy, I use those. And then that helps open it all the way so that I don't get any little pleats in there. I press that and then I will put a clamper on there. And this is what I often do. I know I've shown you this before, but I often do this and it works out great for filming as well. I stack my clappers and I'll just use those to press that open because, you know, this is my ironing board space and I like to be able to have quite a bit of space to do bigger pieces. And so a lot of times I'll just stack them up. You know how I, you know, designed my design boards years ago because I liked to stack up instead of out. It's kind of like the same thing. Now these clappers are the Rider Blake clappers and they're made of wood. And so they absorb the heat and then there's weight on there and it just flattens them down. And so I like to do that, leave that there while I go on to the next segment. Okay, so the next segments I'm going to be doing are C, which is, I'm going to see if I can slant this even more. I'm hoping that you can see this. But these are rectangles right here. Now you can turn this block and the rectangles are across the top here if you want. I think that's how it is in the instructions, but it's the same difference, okay? Because it's a symmetrical block all the way around. And so because my block is turned this way, my rectangles go down the side. Okay, so these are 2x4 rectangles. And then I'm going to use the same background fabric, B, and put easy corner triangles on them. And so I'm going to do the same thing. Maybe I shouldn't have put that right there. I'm going to set that one under there so that you can see I can kind of do the same thing. Let me bring this in. Trying to do the best I can without Cassidy being able to film me right now. Our schedules are just not meeting up, and so I am going to be doing it on my own. And so let me know if you can see okay. I thank you so much for the feedback that I got on the last video that I did without Cassidy, and you said really the only feedback was that you would like a little bit more lighting, so I did bring a couple of more lamps in the corner, so hopefully you can see that. I do turn this off because it's kind of glaring in the camera a little bit, and so hopefully you can see everything by zooming in. All right, so now I've got these set up right here, okay, like that, and I'm going to be sewing 2 of them going like this and 2 of them going like that. Okay. I keep forgetting to put my readers on. Okay. Now, if you're drawing your lines on here, then you don't ever have to guess which direction you're sewing. That is if you lay them on the correct direction, you know. But I just find it saves time. Sometimes I do. My Seam So Easy guide only goes out to this point. So if it's bigger, like it's bigger than like a 4-inch or a 4.5 inch easy corner triangle, then I'll usually, you know, take that pencil and mark it. But most of the time, they're not bigger than that. Okay, so I just start on the corner, again, making sure that I'm watching this corner as I'm going along. And let's throw another scrap in between that. I do have my little stitchy bee down here that I use a lot. It's just sticks right here, and you can unstick it off. It's got a little razor there. You can unstick it off and it doesn't leave a residue or anything, so I do use that a lot. Okay, I'm going to set those seams. I have to wear those to sew but not to press, so It's always on and off for me. And then before I trim these, I'm going to lay them out and make sure that I've got them going opposite directions, like, you know, I can see that I have that, and so that's correct. And so I'm just going to trim off that excess. And these are too small. They're very, very small. And even if I sewed them together, it would be less than 1 inch finished, and which would mean that would be less than a 1/2 inch finished in a quilt. So they're just too small for me to keep. But when I did this one right here, I saved those because these are 3.5 inch squares that we work with. I saved those, and I will, you know, I'll just talk about that at the end, but I do save my trimmings when they're big enough to do something with. So, all right, I'm just going to go ahead and open that, and I'm going to gather these pieces, and maybe I'll try not to stack so high so I don't cover what you can see here. And maybe I'll start over here. So I've got that open, and I just quick press that right there so that I know that it's open all the way. Once again, I'll try not to repeat myself, keep saying the same things over and over again, but I know that a lot of you have followed me for a long time, and I really appreciate that. So you know my methods and how I sew, but I have got a lot of new subscribers, and thank you so very much. And so I just want to make sure that I'm, you know, explaining what I'm doing and not just assuming that, you know exactly what I'm doing. So let me talk about pressing seams open a little bit, because, you know, I've done this for years, and it's getting quite popular now, but it used to not be a thing, and I used to kind of have to explain myself over and over again about why I press seams open. But, you know, I've done it when it really wasn't taught to do, and I just find that if you use a stitch that is secure, I use a just maybe a little bit smaller than a regular sewing stitch that you would use on your machine, but I use really good thread. I use Arafil, and I don't ever have a problem with my seams coming apart by pressing my seams open. And I've quilted for many, many years, had many, many quilts, you know, in and out of the washer and all of that stuff, and I just haven't had a problem with that. You know, during my grandma's time when she taught me to quilt, you didn't press seams open because as you were stretching your quilt out on the quilt frames, if you had your seams open, and you had to needle all of those layers as well. So when I talked to her about pressing my seams open, she thought it made sense, you know, now in these modern days. But then it would have maybe pulled apart because of all the stretching, but also because you had to needle all of those layers of fabric. And so you typically press to one side, and then you would quilt like in the ditch, where you were just going through 3 layers of fabric, well, 2 layers of fabric with the batting in the middle. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, so I find the reason I like to press open is because I find that my blocks are flatter, and so they are more accurate. As you press to one side, that takes up, you know, some of it's kind of scrunching your block up more and more and more, even if, you know, your seam allowances are great and everything, especially in small blocks and small patchwork blocks or little segments that have a lot of seams in them. Every time that you press to one side, it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's just my personal opinion, and that's just how I do things. Of course, you don't have to do things that way at all. I'm just here on my channel to show you how I do things and what works for me, but I am in no way saying that you have to do everything, you know, how I do it, because that's just not true. We all have our own way, and we all like to do things, you know, differently and what works for us. All right, so now I'm going to start laying out this block, and so that we can sew it together. Oh wait, okay, I've got to make sure I've got the correct pieces there. And so these are kind of like what I call the flower petals, and this is the center of the flower. This block does not have to be a flower, but you know, I called it Bloom and Grow because I kind of designed it that way, and these are the leaves, and here's the flower, and then we've got some accent corners, right? So what you want to do is lay this out. Okay, that goes that way. Like your little puzzle, that goes that way. There we go. Okay, so this is another reason I really love my design boards, and actually why I came up with them years ago when I was teaching beginning quilting classes, is because I find that a lot of mistakes are being made in between the pressing when you've sewn your pieces right, but if you don't lay them back out right again and sew them together, then it's always easy to make a mistake. And so this really helps me to not make mistakes. And so now what I'm going to be doing is sewing these two pieces together, okay? 4 pieces, I should say. Four times, 2 pieces together 4 times. And now I'll just be using this line right here because this is a 1/4 inch. And I have this lined up, and how I put this Seems So Easy guide on my machine is I just line up the needle with the center of this line right here, and then I drew these graphs on here and designed it this way and a curve so that your fabric doesn't get caught as easily, but if it was cornered. And I use these graphs with the straight lines on my machines to make sure that I get things straight. But you can always easily use a ruler. Let's see, I've got these rulers. I don't have a small, well, no, I do. Let me show you this. I have this small trim-it ruler in here. And this is a 1/4 inch right here for the trim-it rulers. And these are great to make sure that you're lining up your Seems So Easy guide right. You can just set this under the presser foot and put your needle down onto this 1/4 inch and then move this back and forth until that's lined up. Okay, so this is very handy, any size of these small ones, to get under there to use with that 1/4 inch, because you can really definitely see that 1/4 inch in that aqua. And then I just go ahead and just feed them through the machine like normal. Now when I'm sewing 2 pieces together like this, instead of starting right here, because I've got a lot of bulk here, I like to start in the corner where there's a lot of bulk, because I just feel like I have more control when I'm starting there by putting it under the presser foot instead of waiting for this presser foot to go against those seams. They may, maybe become easier for them to flip up. And so that's what I like to do there. Let's see. Got that little cup there. All right, now I'll flip these over. And again, I'm going to flip these over this way so that I'm starting right there. Okay, so let me put these back on here so that I don't, or at least stack them right here. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with these. Set my seams first. It just, by pressing down, it really helps to set that thread, that top thread, with the bobbin thread, and just kind of makes them flat, which helps the block lie flatter. Okay, so right here where all these seams meet up, I especially like to use this roller so that I can really push down right there and really open that up and get that flat. Okay, And so what I'm going to do with that, then I like to just, instead of iron, I don't want to distort my block or my pieces. So I'll just press. And yes, I do like to use a vintage iron. It's nice and hot. And I don't use steam. I don't like the steam holes to distort my pieces as I'm pressing them or ironing them. And I find that that does that. And I also only apply like water or any kind of moisture to my blocks before I cut them out, because I am working with 100% cotton. I don't like to use steam in my iron after I'm sewing my pieces together or while I'm sewing my pieces together, because they shrink. It shrinks them up, you know, just a little by little, because that's what happens with 100% cotton. You apply heat to it if it's wet, and it's going to shrink. And so what I like to do is, when I'm cutting fabric out, I will take my spray bottle. I just use a spray bottle separate for my iron, and I will mix it with half Mary Ellen's Best Press starch and half water, approximately half, and that's what I use. So I do starch my fabric. I do lightly starch my fabric, but that is before I cut, and I just do it when I cut. Like, you know, I'm using fat quarters right now to cut things off of, and I will just lay that out and press like the 18-inch part of the fat quarter or something like that, and cut a strip off and press that, and then just cut, you know, subcut pieces from that. And so I find that works really well for me, and I'm not shrinking my block segments or anything like that. Okay, I'm looking for my block. Okay, now we're just going to put this around this center. Just make sure that the points of the background are going into that flower there, and we're going to press, we're going to sew, excuse me, these to this triangle E. Triangle, it's a square, it's not a triangle. And I just line those up. Now you can pin if you'd like to pin. I'm just typically not a pinner unless I really feel like that it's necessary, but you can definitely pin. But what I do is I just start at the beginning where it's supposed to line up, and I just use my fingers to become my pins right there. And I just hold it down here and line it up, and I know where it's going to go. I like to sew with the seam side up if possible, and so I can see exactly where I'm sewing and make sure that I'm not going to sew off any points or anything like that, and so that I can adjust if I need to and stop, stop at that point. And so I'm just going to hurry and flip this around, do the same thing again, line this up, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with pinning. I just feel like I've just always used my fingers, and it just saves time for me. And a lot of times in my videos, I'll show you when I pin and how I pin, when I feel that it's necessary. And so you're welcome to go to my past videos in any of my block piecing, and I'll talk about that. I do use my double pins when I pin. Let me show you these. That reminds me. So I've got some, look at these cute little containers, my little pins. These are my new applique pins right here. And these are the new little containers that I designed, these little bee containers, but look how cute they are. Once the pins are in here, you can use these little containers for other little fun things. But here's my double pins. Okay, and these have been out of stock for a while before we had the pandemic. We had them made at a certain place, but all of that changed. And so now I've got a new company manufacturing them through Rider Blake Designs. I designed them, and they're just really great, even better quality pins. I love them. And so these are my double pins that I use. And so they are out and available now. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is set that seam. Once again, I'm going to open these up, and right where those seams come together in the middle, I really do a good press, because I just want it open all the way, because then my block is going to be more accurate, right? And then I usually fill. You can fill if your seams are open all the way. I'm sorry if sometimes I say the wrong words like block for seam and all that stuff, but I hope that you know what I'm talking about. I do know how to talk, but for some reason when I turn on the camera to film, things happen. Okay, so then I'm just gonna set those there, and sometimes I like to put a little bit extra on there for the weight. And so now, while those are setting, let's pull these pieces over and let's do, I'm going to put those extra pieces over there if I need them. Oh, I've given you a sneak peek of something that maybe I'm not supposed to, but here it is. But this is, I was sewing a little bit ahead, so this is block 2. This is Beverly McCullough's block, and this is block 2. And so I've got that pre-sewn. So there's a little peek at that. And I'm sure she'll be doing a great tutorial for that. And all right, so we've got that going. I think I've left these under here long enough that I can set that there, and as you know, I'm just going to be sewing 1/4 inch seam allowance those to that. But I'm going to be setting up the next easy corner triangle segments, which is this right here. Okay, so we're just going to be doing the same thing. These are A's, so I've got 4 A's here. So I'd like to set them all the same way. I cut 2 layers of fabric at a time, so always have to make sure they're flipped. And then I've got fabric F here, which are 2-inch squares as well. And what I'm going to do with that, usually how I lay it out, because I split them up, and of course, again, I need to go different angles right here. And so I'm just going to flip these over right here. Let me show them separately so that you can see them. And I'm just going to make sure that I do going this way and going this way. 4 of them are going to go that way, 4 of them are going to go that way. Okay, so I'm going to do that so that I can get those under the clapper and get those cooling off before I finish the other center part of the flower. And so once I know that I've got this first one set up right, I just know that I can just follow suit with the following 3 when I'm doing sets of 4. And it's very important that you line up all corners and edges on these easy corner triangles. Now, I know I've told you before that my grandma and her sisters, my great aunts, taught me how to quilt. And doing these easy corner triangles, they weren't able to do those then. There was no rotary cutting and things like that, and so they have to do everything with templates. And she just thought this was such a great invention when I showed her how I was doing, you know, flip corners, easy corner triangles, whatever you want to do, so that you didn't have to on a lot of traditional blocks. Some templates, some things you still have to use templates for. There's just not the angles that, you know, that you could do the easy corner triangles with. But I love this method, and I've been sewing with this method for many, many years and designing with this method, and it allows me to design and make all of the picture blocks too that I do, what I call picture blocks, which are, you know, objects instead of a traditional quilt block or patchwork piecing. All right. Got my cute little scraps of fabric in my cute little vintage bowl. And then I'm just going to clip these apart. Bring them over here. It helps me to just lay them all out, knowing that I've done them in sets of 4, knowing I haven't lost one, didn't forget one, didn't run out of bobbin, all that kind of thing. To just check them out, press them down, and again, then I like to stack them up this is just a habit that I have, and I do and make sure that I can see the thread, that it's going 2 ways, and I have sets of 4, and then I can go ahead and do my trimming. So the other day when I was setting up, getting ready to film this video, then I thought it was a great time to do what a lot of you had been asking to do, and that was to take more close-up pictures of my sewing loft up here. So I'm upstairs in the loft. We did move into our new home last year, and so I did do a video about that, and I gave you a tour of all of the area up here. All of my upstairs in this loft is where I do all my sewing and crafting and designing and working, and it's my work area, or what I like to call my play area. And so I did do a tour of that, and I walked around and showed you my closets and my rooms and what I do them for, you know, what I use each room for, and Cassidy filmed me. But since that video, I've had a lot of you request that you wanted to see more close-up pictures, particularly of my notions here, my vintage notions, and how I display them. I've been collecting vintage sewing notions for a long time, and I have a lot of my grandmas and my aunts and my moms and things like that too, besides what I find at thrift shops or antique shops. And you know, you really can't find that a lot of good things. I don't know, maybe you can, a lot of good things at the, whoops, I forgot to, at the thrift shops as much anymore, because they've been become highly desirable. Where when I was collecting them, because I was vintage when vintage wasn't cool, I could just pick them up for hardly anything. I mean, some things, I used to get like beautiful hand embroidered aprons for like $0.25, and sometimes even $0.10. It was just crazy. And I just, you know, admire that work, and I just could not let it go. So I have like over 100 aprons in my collection, things like that. And I'm realizing once again, I'm probably covering this up. So, so yeah, I took a bunch of close-up pictures, and I just put them into a slideshow for you and to show you. Let me know if you've watched that, if you like that, and if you'd like me to do that in other rooms. I can do that and show you. I've got my guest room, which is my cross stitch room, where I keep my cross stitch supplies and everything in. I'm going to put 2 on this clapper. These are small enough that I can put 2 on one clapper as well, instead of just singles. I do have these long ones, but I have plenty of space here to work with the short ones. And so now, so I have my crochet room, I have my cross stitch room, which if you saw that video where I'm sitting here, my guest room is right there, my crochet room is there, but that door right there that's closed is my work room. That's where I cut my fabric, on my paper crafting is, my drawing, and that's, and then this, you can't, that goes into my little kitchenette bathroom area, but you can't see the door that opens back there. And here, I'm gonna put 2 here. But that goes into my fabric storage room, and where I cut all my fabric off my bolts, and where I keep all of my notions, all my scrappy stash, it's all fabric. That's where I keep all of my fabric. And so if you are liking the little close-ups that I've done and things like that, please let me know. And let me know on that video, let me know on this video, and leave me a comment and a like, and you know, let me know. That encourages me to do more of that. If you would like, I'm happy to share. I like to share my fun vintagey finds, and I love displaying them. And so, of course, I like to show people how I display them, for those of you who are like-minded and who love vintage like I do, or just, you know, organizational tips or anything like that. So let me know. Okay, I think those are cool enough. And all of those let's see, I want to make sure these are all going the same direction, because as I get chatty, okay, I gotta make sure I didn't do something didn't look right when I was laying them out. Let's check this out. Okay, so I've got 2 going that way. Okay, that's correct. I'm like, how could I have made a mistake? But you know, I always like to check. And so then I'm going to just sew these 2 together right here. And this is turning into quite a little chatty quilty session. I hope that's okay with you. This little machine, sometimes it has a mind of its own. Each one of them have their little own personalities, right? I haven't named this one yet. I've been sewing with her for a few months, and I like to, sometimes if I'm undecided on a name, I have a few, I don't know, maybe you can give me some suggestions. But I do have a few ideas, but sometimes I like to sew on them, because when I say they have their own personality, sometimes they do. They have their own little, you know, these little vintage machines. They're all featherweights, and I've sewn on featherweights for years, and that's what I do all of my piecing on. And I love the way that they sew. And of course, they don't come in colors. You have to have them painted, custom painted, and yes, with automotive paint. But this one Mr. Honey found last year at a consignment shop. He found one, and it was, of course, black. They did make some white ones, but most of them are just, you know, come black, and it was really in need of some love and care. And so he, you know, worked it over a little bit, and then I took it over to in St. George. There's this lovely lady named Nora who paints featherweights, and so St. George is about 4 hours south from where I live here in Utah, and she painted it for me. I custom, you know, picked the paint, which I always do, custom pick the paint and, you know, have it mixed and things like that. But so this is in my tea rose color. And in my tour of my sewing room, you can see all of my featherweights that I have so far on top of my cupboard up here, and I'm sure that I'll end up putting some in the opening of the slideshow, some of those pictures that I took, so you can see those again, or you can go back and see. But I love color, as you can tell, and I love having my fun vintage things around me, and so I've been very happy up here in this loft being able to have plenty of room to sew and have plenty of room to, you know, display my fun items that I love. Okay, so I'm going to try to stop talking long enough to talk to you about what I'm doing here. This is supposed to be a quilt block tutorial, right? I hope you're sewing along with me. And I hope you don't find the chatting too distracting, because a lot of times I don't have a lot of time to chat, because I will do a lot of the segments first, and so we're just doing the same step once. But I don't know, once in a while it's nice to just show exactly what I'm doing in real time, right? And so that leaves open some time for chatting. Okay, so I'm gonna let those cool. And then I'm gonna stitch the other side here. So as I'm putting this through, again, even though it's longer, I'm just lining it up here, and then I'm just making sure that all these edges are straight and line up, and then I use the line on my Seam So Easy guide. And see, that's why I like to sew with the seam up, because sometimes this foot might, you know, your presser foot may go ahead and want to flip up your seams, and that way I can stop that from happening. I can see exactly what's going on. And if I have seams underneath, I'm usually filling at the time. You can tell if they got bumpy or something opened up. Once in a while that will happen, and I'll just unpick a little bit of a section and resew over it again. Okay, so now I've got that. I'm going to set those seams real quick, and then this should be cool at that point. So I've got these. Let's bring them over here. Open this up. Where's my little roller? And then I've got these intersections here where everything meets up again that I like to really push down. I don't want any pleats in there because that's going to distort my block. That's going to make my block smaller, and that's going to defeat the purpose of even pressing these seams open, right? Because that's why I like to press my seams open, because when I don't, there's an automatic pleat that kind of happens that's sometimes difficult to work with for me. And so I have a new product coming out soon, in about 6 weeks or so, that helps with these little seams when I meet up right here. And so as soon as that is out and available, I don't want to do a tutorial on it yet when it's not available. So I'll do that as it gets closer to time, but I think in about 6 weeks or so that will be out. And so I'm going to make sure that I've got a clapper on all of those seams where they meet up. Okay, and then again with why did I take those off? And then with Quilty Physics, you know, just with weight, I think that helps. Okay, so now I've got these 4 pieces right here. Okay, and I'm going to take 2 of them and take these 4 pieces G. These are 2-inch squares as well. I'm going to sew while these are cooling. I'm going to sew these on the end right here. Okay, on the top and bottom strips right here. A lot of people have asked me if I use a scant 1/4-inch seam. I let my thread get caught there. Okay, and I just use my Seam So Easy guide. I don't really use a scant. I just try to do everything as accurate as I can without trying to overcompensate or compensate for different things. I like to press accurately. I like to use my 1/4-inch seam accurately, and I like to cut accurately. And then, you know, I just feel like that's the best that I can do. And, you know, there's always a way to fix something if it's off or anything like that. But that's a good starting point to make sure that we cut. And you always definitely want your fabric pressed before you cut it out, because if you've got wrinkles in your fabric, then you're not going to be cutting accurately, right? So you want to make sure it's nice and flat and wrinkle-free. Okay. So now I've got these here. I'm just going to trade places. That's what I'm always doing with my clappers here. I'm always trading places. Okay, so now I've got that block there, and I'm going to look and see if anything. Okay, this one, I think these 2 things are sticking up a little bit more than I would like, so I may not have put the clapper on it long enough. So I'm just going to roll that because we have a minute. I'm just going to roll over that again and make sure that I've got that nice hot iron on it. And sometimes at this point, I may even flip it over, making sure that these are open. And press it from this side. Try not to iron, but just press. And then put a clapper back on it, okay? Or 2. And then I can go ahead while that's cooling some more, open these up. So this really helps to open them up, especially I find that if I don't use it, that it's open up in the center, but maybe not all the way to the ends where you want those seams to meet up. That's important. You want it open up all the way to here, from here to here. And so that really helps, just rolling that right there. Put a set of clampers there. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's a little better right there. All right, so at this point, this is where I use my trim it rulers a lot. This is one segment, and this should measure at this point 7.5 inches before I add these on here. And so I always like to pull in my trim it rulers. So this is a 7.5 inch ruler, and at this point I can lay it on there and see all these lines, how everything lines up centered. I have lines there that echo this square, lines everything up. I can see that this is the 1/4 inch seam allowance, and so inside this aqua window here is what my block is going to look like once it's sewn in to the quilt, and I can see if I'm short or long, something needs to be trimmed off. Right now I can't see anything that needs to be trimmed off. I think it looks pretty good actually. But if I found a part that was maybe a little bit shorter, let me look top down here. I can see, I don't know if you can, but I see that this red part here goes a little bit shorter underneath the 1/4 inch seam. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a pin and I'm just gonna put that right there. And let me grab this because I know that's the section that's a little bit shorter. And you might be able to see that see how this all goes straight up, but underneath it was just like 1/8 of an inch too short. But when I put that pin there, now I know when I go to sew these sides on right here, well, I can sew this right on there. I'll do that first. When I go to lay that on there, that I can make up that difference, and I know that that's a little bit short. And so when I lay them together, I can make up that difference in my seam, meaning, I hope I can show you this on the camera. So I will stick a pin in here just so I can flip this over. So all this is lined up because this is the side that was correct, but this red part was a little bit short. And so then I'll go ahead and pin, and I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to try to put it up on the design board here. And so you can see that this red part is a little bit lower than where this goes. It's how it comes across straight here, and that's going to kind of make up the difference. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do that now, so that you know, that's taken care of, and that will keep my block square and straight the way that it's supposed to be. Let me bring that over here. Whoops, it's magnetic, so of course it's going to hook onto everything. Okay, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's not, right? If you have it next to your scissors. And then I'm just gonna do, the more seams that I have, I'm just very particular as I sew through. I don't really zip it through. For me personally, I don't believe in sewing super fast because that's when I make mistakes. I like to see exactly what's going on under this foot. I use an open toe foot as often as I can so that I can see, I don't know if it's called open toe, but meaning I can see, I'm using a foot that the needle, I can see the needle exactly going into that fabric. And this is actually the foot, the featherweight this is the original foot, which I like. That's one of the reasons I like that, is because I can see that going in. And so now I'm just adjusting this. This is the shorter part. I'm just making sure that, you know, makes up that difference. And so hopefully that helps. No block is exactly accurate. I shouldn't say no block. Sometimes you do get a very accurate block, but not very often. It's very typical to be off, you know, like a 16th of an inch one way or something like that. But that's why I use these. As long as we know that, right, then we can adjust where we need to adjust. It also helps when you're sewing these seams together. Okay, I want to do this way. Okay, to know that this angle and this angle line up. And so that's very helpful to know as you're sewing along. Right here, make sure I start that on the corner. That the next part that I want to make sure those little angles line up there. And that just helps me. And then I've got a center seam here on both of them that can be lined up. So you could pin there. That's where I would use my double pins if I needed to, if I felt like they were not going to line up correctly and I was having a problem. Then I would take my double pin and that's why I have double pins, is so that you can put it on one side. I should have had one of these in the bowl. Okay, let me get this apart. My cute little bee container. So I've got two little double pins here, and I will just put the tip in. I won't do it like this, like a shovel. I will just poke that pin in there to keep those seams, one pin on one side of the seam and one pin on the other side of the seam, and that will not slip. Okay, and so that's what I do, and I can sew over them. They're thin enough. I'm going to put that back in the pin bowl. Or you can just take it out right before you sew, just like I did. This cute little pink machine, she's a little temperamental. Sometimes I have to go like that to get her to start. You know, one thing I didn't do was that I always do before I start filming is check my bobbin thread, make sure I have a full bobbin so I don't have to stop and change my bobbin. And I didn't do that this time, so I'm hoping that I have enough thread here. Okay, so those are nice and flat that way. Hoping I have enough thread here to finish this block, which I've only got 2 more seams, right? Okay, so that's pressed that way. I open those up and I just look at that, how those meet up, and I like how that looks. If I don't, then I can unpick the whole seam or just a little section and kind of pull it over to make up the difference. But it's, you know, like I always say, and I've said on my videos before, this block is for me. And if I'm happy with it, then I'm fine. It's good enough for who it's for. I'm just really not after perfection. I just want to make sure that it goes into my quilt and it's just supposed to look the way it's supposed to look. And I'm not trying to win any contests or anything like this. I'm just enjoying sewing scraps, you know, fabric together and little pieces of cut fabric. And I really enjoy playing with color and texture. And when I say texture, I mean it's all 100% cotton, but the texture I'm talking about is the print, the variety in the prints and the design on the prints. And so I like to design my fabric with all different little prints that I feel adds texture. Okay, I'm giving that a good press, and then I'm going to be lining that up underneath the clappers, making sure all those seams line up. And at this point, because these are much heavier, you know, I can just go like that and put a little tower on there if I want to. While I'm letting that cool, let's just talk about this block for a minute. So now at this point, it's 10.5 inches, but when you sew it into your quilt, it will be 10 inches. So when I designed this block, I put these little cornerstones here in the block because I thought it would be super cute. And you could put sashing around it if you wanted to make this block and you want to make it into a quilt or a runner or something like that. Make several. You can add sashings with backgrounds, and I would cut them 2 inches just like this, so they would finish at 1.5 inches. So I would cut them 2 inches, and then you could put a square, a cornerstone there, and so you would have a secondary pattern of a little 5 patch. Or you could simply just sew them, do them all scrappy and all different colors. Sew the blocks together, what I call a 1 block wonder, when you don't need to put sashing in between, where you simply just sew the blocks together. And if you had 4 different cornerstones within each block, excuse me, these are all the same color, but if you have 4 different blocks that you're sewing together and each one of those have different cornerstones, when you sew it together, you'll get a cute little scrappy 4 patch. Okay, and so that's a cute idea for this one. And in fact, I don't even know if I'll just, I mean, this is what the block looks like finished, right? Because I want to talk to you, this video is going to be way long. That's what the back looks like with it pressed open. Because I want to be able to talk to you about my idea that what I wanted to do for the big block. Okay, so this is the 20-inch block. I'm going to have the cutting again, once again for it, then the recipe, it will be here in my video description, so don't forget to click on the description underneath this video. And so this right now measures 20 and a half, but when I sew it into a quilt or a pillow or whatever, it's going to measure 20 inches. So it's exactly twice the size. So the cutting is twice the size. But when I designed this block, I knew that it was going to be that Peace and Plenty, my new fabric collection, would be just coming out, because I know that the Write a Block Challenge always starts in January, and so I'm always using my latest collection to make this quilt. And so I designed this block, this is like a long story long, so that it would have a big square in the center, because I thought it would be really fun to make this into a pillow, or you could make several of these and make a quilt if you wanted to, but make this into a pillow and use my So Simple Shapes and put an applique flower in the center of this block. Okay, this is 8 inches, and so that's plenty big to do any of these flowers. And so this is the set that comes with, this is the flower basket sampler. This is the set of So Simple Shapes. It's going to be for my sew along that has nothing to do with this other than it's in Peace and Plenty. But it starts in a couple of weeks, and this is what the quilt looks like. Okay, and this is my flower basket sampler. This is what it looks like. This entire quilt is pieced, okay? It's rotary cut and machine pieced, except for the flowers are appliqued with the So Simple Shapes, and the little basket trims is applique as well, and then the handle is applique, but everything else is machine piece. So there's not a lot of applique in this quilt, but I wanted to do this cute little set of all these flowers to give a good set and a good variety of flowers. I'm always, you know, loving to draw flowers and do applique flowers. But with this set, you can pull these out and lay any of these flowers on here and put this in the center of this block. And I just think that would be so cute, a quilt or a runner or a pillow. And it just looks very spring. And I just think it would be fun. Any of these, you know, like the single flower, I think it would be fun to do a background color for the flower, so it sort of looks like a white daisy, and maybe pick a yellow for the center, right? And you know, you can just lay them however you want and decide what you want to do, is do a single flower here. And so that's my idea for that. And so I wanted to let you know about that. If you're interested in doing this sew along, I'll leave a link to the sew along guide here in the blog description too, that tells you everything. It's a free PDF download where it just gives you all the cutting and everything that you need to do, and all of the yardage that you need. And speaking of yardage, for, I don't know if I mentioned this with the Write a Block Challenge that I'm doing this block for, is I will leave the link for that information now, even though they're not releasing all of the blocks at the same time. They have released the quilt setting, which in the past it's been a secret, but now they've decided to reveal it this time, so you know what the setting looks like. And but you can get the yardage. The yardage is available, and they tell you that now. So I designed I did not design the quilt, I just designed this block, but I did color the quilt with how I'm going to be doing my Peace and Plenty. And so with each block, I will show you on my Instagram, I'll show you what it looks like, and there's pictures on, you know, there's pictures out there with my my colored version with Peace and Plenty. And so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you could see everything okay. Please leave me comments, leave me feedback. Thank you so much for watching my videos and for supporting me and my art and my channel. I really appreciate you, and I love having you in my sewing area and sewing with me, and I will chat with you later.